Hello, my loves. Rainy Day chapter. Goblins in the Castle by Bruce Coville. We're on chapter 11. If you've missed the other chapters, there's 10 more. The reward. A wave of despair washed over me. Dropping my head into my arms, I began to sob. My crying was interrupted by a hand on my shoulder. I rolled over ready to fight and found myself staring at a beautiful woman. The thought that she may be my mother flashed through my mind, then disappeared. My mother had abandoned me for whatever reason 11 years before. I wasn't going to find her here in the woods. "Who are you?" I asked, trying to keep my voice from trembling. She didn't answer right away, only smiled. The last of the moonlight seemed to catch in her enormous eyes, to rest gently on her long dark hair. Her smile brought slight wrinkles to the sides of her mouth and eyes. "Who are you?" I asked again. "I have many names," she said, reaching out a hand. Oh, she was reaching out a hand to help me up. "Around here, I am mostly known as Granny Pinchbottom." I was so surprised I let go of her hand and fell backwards. "You're supposed to be old and ugly." She turned away from me. When she turned back, her beauty had vanished. Her hair hung limp and gray around her shoulders, and her nose curved out and down so that it pointed at her warty chin. "What you want is what you will see," she cackled. I drew back in shock. "Be careful." Looking behind me, I saw that I had come within inches of falling over the edge of the gorge. I took a step forward. "How did you change like that?" "None of your business. Follow me." Turning, she walked into the forest, not looking to see if I was actually following her. "Wait!" I cried. "I have to get something." She didn't wait. Though I was worried about losing sight of her, I couldn't leave Igor's bear behind. Hoping I would still be able to see Granny Pinchbottom after I retrieved it, I scrambled over the edge of the gorge and grabbed the bear. When I came back up, the old woman was gone. "Wait!" I cried again, running forward. "Wait for me!" Within minutes, I was totally lost, not only unable to find Granny Pinchbottom, but also unable to find my way back to the gorge. Clutching Igor's bear, I glanced around nervously, wondering if more goblins lurked in the woods. A twig snapped behind me. I spun, ready to lash out with the bear, and found myself face to face with a girl. She had big eyes and dark hair that hung past her shoulders. She wore a ragged brown shift, cinched at the center with a leather belt. A leather pouch hung at her right side, a long knife at her left. "What are you doing here?" I cried in surprise. "I live here. What are you doing here?" I could think of several answers. I settled for the most immediate one, looking for Granny Pinchbottom. The girl's eyes widened. "You're a brave one." "I suppose so," I replied. It was beginning to sink in that this was the first girl I had ever seen. She was interesting looking. "What's your name?" "Fauna. And yours?" "I'm called William." "Do you know where I can find Granny Pinchbottom?" "Are you sure you want to do that?" "I have to. Something bad happened, and I think she can help. At least my friend thought she could help. But something happened to him, too. So now I have to try to find her on my own." I paused and then added, "Actually, she found me a few minutes ago, but then she disappeared." "Disappeared? That doesn't sound like her." I sighed. "She told me to follow her. I asked her to wait because I had to get something, but she didn't. By the time I had gotten what I needed, she was gone." Fauna laughed. A sound even prettier than the stream that ran through Igor's dungeon. "Granny Pinchbottom doesn't wait for anyone. Come on, I'll show you where she lives, but I won't go inside with you. You'll have to do that on your own." The way she said this did little to add to my confidence. "Where do you live?" I asked, as we began to walk. "In the woods, not far from here. And you?" "I live in Toad-in-the-Cage Castle." She looked more surprised than ever. "What are you doing out here?" "I don't want to talk about it." "Suit yourself," she said, quickening her pace so that I had to hurry to keep up with her. She knew the forest well, finding easy paths through brambly hedges that I would have thought impassable, picking her way across streams where the stepping stones were invisible to my eye, until I saw where she placed her feet. The next to the last stream we crossed was about 50 yards down from a waterfall, nearly as tall as towers of Toad-in-a-Cage Castle. About 45 minutes after passing the waterfall, we came to a small clearing. In the center of the clearing stood a cottage with rough walls and a thatched roof. The light shining from its windows flashed in changing colors. "That's it," whispered my guide. "Granny Pinchbottom's place. Good luck." She stepped away and disappeared among the moon shadows. "Fauna," I whispered urgently. "Wait." No answer. I stared at the cottage nervously. Taking a deep breath, I walked forward and knocked on the door. "Come in." The voice was familiar. It went with the second face Granny Pinchbottom had shown me. I pushed open the door. The single room of the cottage was illumined by 3 large logs that burned in the stone fireplace. A large cauldron hung over the fire, steaming and bubbling. In a rocking chair near the fire sat Granny Pinchbottom. A huge black cat lay sprawled across her lap. It gave me an arrogant stare, then jumped down and stalked across the room, as if disgusted by my very existence. "You took long enough getting here," said the old woman. "You didn't wait for me," I replied, with more bravery than I felt. She shrugged. "Why don't you tell me what happened?" To my astonishment, I did just that. Despite the guilt and embarrassment I felt over having let the goblins loose, I opened my mouth and poured out the entire tale. As I spoke, Granny Pinchbottom reached into the bag next to her. My eyes widened as I watched her pull out a strand of light and began weaving it through her fingers as if she were making a cat's cradle. As I finished my story, she tied the light into a knot, then reached into the bag and drew out a silver amulet. It dangled from a silver chain. Popping open the amulet, she tucked the knot of light inside. "Take this," she said, handing it to me. "Why?" I asked in surprise. "Call it a reward." "For what?" She threw back her head and cackled. "For releasing the goblins. I appreciate it very much."